So far, Bob Duco, Christian radio personality and Bible apologist, has failed to give sufficient evidence that a God exists, with his appeals to the first and second laws of thermodynamics and the origin of life. He tries again on his fourth attempt to prove the existence of God by offering perhaps the most absurd reason of all. He simply wants to know, if God doesn't exist,
what is the alternative? Think about it. What is the alternative? It is not our responsibility to prove that God exists. It's an atheist's responsibility to prove he does not. It's an atheist's responsibility to prove how we could have life and complexity and design and matter and energy and all of these things on their own from nothingness with no guiding hand.
This is so utterly back-ass words that it's a challenge to come up with a serious response. Of course, it is the responsibility of anyone making a positive claim to demonstrate the evidence for that claim. As long as theists like Duco claim that God exists, it is definitely his burden to prove his claim true. An atheist makes no such positive claim. The only obligation we atheists have, and it's really an obligation out of politeness and not much else, is to explain to the theist why their proofs, such as they are, fail with us. That's the reason I'm doing this series. Duco's question isn't leveled against atheism, but simply science itself. He's basically bundled up his first three proofs, believes they have sufficiently nullified science by falsely claiming that things like the universe and life popped into existence out of nothingness, literally nothingness, and then asks, what's the alternative? Of course, the alternative is science, but he believes if science doesn't have answers for these questions of origins, then his God wins by default. It's again the worst kind of sloppy thinking imaginable. He goes on to give an example of this kind of sloppy thinking, which he actually believes is further proof for the existence of God. He states,
let's imagine for a moment you're walking along the sidewalk. You're walking next to a building, and you look down on the sidewalk and you notice that there are a couple of hundred toothpicks laying down there on the sidewalk. However, these toothpicks are spelled out very neatly into a name, and you notice that it's your name. Now let's say two people come along, and these two people are trying to figure out how those toothpicks got there that way. Let's say person A has his theory. His theory is that someone, some intelligence, placed those toothpicks in that neatly arranged order to spell out the name. The second person, his theory is that those toothpicks fell out of the window and just coincidentally happened to land that way on the sidewalk, that no one designed the toothpicks that way. So these are the two guys' theories, the first guy and the second guy. Now let me ask you this. Which person's theory has the true burden of proof placed on it?
That's easy. They both do. They both do because both have offered an explanation for how the toothpicks got to be arranged the way they are. I don't see why this is so controversial. Duco seems to think that the person stating matter-of-factly that an intelligence arranged the toothpicks has no further burden to provide evidence of his case. Again, Duco relies on what he thinks is self-evident to be sufficient to prove his case. But what appears to be self-evident isn't always enough and isn't always true. When the person answers that an intelligence spelled out the name with the toothpicks, it would be good to question what sort of intelligence is behind the event and why do they believe an intelligence spelled out the name. If the answer is human intelligence, because only humans know how to acquire toothpicks at a store and how to communicate via writing, indeed it was a very specific sort of intelligence, one that can write in English, then that would be fine. The person could recreate the writing of the name with toothpicks by finding a human intelligence to do such a task. However, if the person said the intelligence was an extraterrestrial intelligence, it would behoove us to ask why and how again. And if all the person could say was, it's a mystery, or because that's what aliens like to do, that doesn't get us very far, does it? So what if the person saying an intelligence spelled out the name with the toothpicks answers, God did it? And we ask why and how, and the answer came back again, it's a mystery, or because it was God's will. That again doesn't get us very far. So again, Duco has done nothing to advance evidence that his God exists. His example is horribly off the mark. And like every other creationist, he confuses biological systems, which can be acted upon by things like natural selection, with things that cannot. He goofs.
I mean, come on now, what's more complex, the toothpicks or the human brain? If you're not willing to believe that those toothpicks could come together on their own, and who would, then why would you believe the human brain could come together on its own?
And of course, no intelligent, properly informed person regarding biological evolution has ever claimed that things like human brains come together on their own. Biological systems can adapt, can evolve. Toothpicks and any other inanimate object of their own accord cannot. Again, ill-informed, sloppy thinking, which does more than merely not convince an atheist of the existence of God, but convinces the atheist instead that the creationist or apologist doesn't know the first thing about what they are talking about. Indeed, apologists using this argument actually take a step backward in regard to their own credibility. If they can't speak intelligently to their critics about a subject they pretend to criticize, a subject which their critics know well, how can the apologist hope to have any remaining credibility when they want to advance their own subject, a subject so far devoid of any convincing evidence whatsoever?
We just need to turn it around, folks, that's all. So, somebody says to me, prove to me God exists. I say to them, no, excuse me, you prove to me he doesn't.